guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm super excited about the video I have for you guys today. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a very easy, very cheap pencil skirt out of some knit fabric. They're super cute and you can wear them for almost any occasion. I have my sister-in-law Lena here with me today, and so she's going to be helping me make these skirts and then show you guys what we're doing. So let's get sewing. So for starters, you're going to need a yard of a knit fabric. I'm using a Liverpool knit here, which is a really nice knit fabric to work with for skirts. And then you're going to need 6 inches of 1-inch elastic. We had taken our fabric and laid it in half so that the fold was the straight edge facing me, and so we could cut on the fold and it would kind of be double the fabric. I have a pattern here that I'm using to cut out with, one that I just made today from Lena's pattern, but if you don't have a pattern, you can always use a pencil skirt or a skirt that you have and just lay it in half down on the fabric with a fold toward the straight side, because what I'm cutting out right now is going to be the front panel. It has no seams in it, it's just going to be the front panel of the skirt. Those for reference for the waist, and then obviously down at the hip, and then taper the skirt back in as you get towards the knees. Lena was actually teaching me how to make these skirts today because I had never made them before, but I really want to show you guys, so I figured I would film as well as I was being taught. A little hack that she showed me is to take the scissors and make a little snip at the top of your skirt once you're done cutting it out. It helps you just to remember what the top section is. It just looks like this and it'll get covered up in the end, but that way you don't confuse the top from the bottom. After I finished cutting out the front solid panel, we kept that panel folded in half and then just took it over and laid it on top of the material on the other side to cut out the back 2 panels. The back is going to have a center seam going down it, and so it's going to be 2 separate panels that will eventually get sewn together. Instead of using the pattern, we used this front panel because we wanted to try to line up the stripes so that when it was all finished and sewed together, they lined up or matched fairly closely. Once I finished cutting out the back 2 panels, I made a little snip in the corner, just like I did on the other one, just to remember or identify the top from the bottom. I then had 2 back panels that would get sewn together and 1 solid front panel for the front of the skirt. I then started cutting out the waistband, and all I did was measure a 2-inch section of fabric and just cut 1 long strip of it, and then we trimmed it down once it was sewn on the skirt. Once you have your waistband cut out, you are ready to start sewing your skirt. So I started by taking this 1 panel for the back of my skirt and folding it in half. The reason I'm doing this is because I am going to create a small seam which will make a tuck in the back of the skirt that is about 3 inches from the top of the waistband, and then it tapers out. It'll help the skirt to be a little bit more fitted and just pull it in nicely around the waist. So I started by taking my measuring tape and measuring down 3 inches and then inserting a pin as a marker. Once you have the pin inserted, you can begin sewing a straight seam 1/4 inch in from the side. Once you get down to about where the pin is, just start gently tapering out toward the side. This is what your seam should look like when you're done. You'll just have a small seam that tapers out towards the side, and then when you open up your panel, you'll have a nice little tuck that will end up pulling in the skirt nice around the back of your waist. I then got my other back panel and did the exact same thing. I folded it in half, measured down 3 inches, put in a pin as a marker, and then sewed in that small seam that tapered out towards the side. After I was done sewing in those 2 small tucks on the back panels, I started attaching my back panels to the front panel of my skirt. So I was sewing in those side seams. I took the big front panel of my skirt and matched it up with 1/2 of the back panel and put the right sides together so the wrong sides of the material were facing out, just to make sure that you always do that so your skirt is sewn the right way. And then matched up the sides of the material that were curved for the hips, because you do not want to sew your back middle straight seam to the side of your skirt. I then sewed a straight seam all the way down the side to create the side seam for my skirt. After that was done, I took the other back panel and attached it to the other side of the straight front panel. So I had 1/2 of the back panel, the full front panel, and 1/2 of the other back panel all sewn together. And the only seam needed to connect my skirt in a circle would be that straight back seam that will sew down at the end. Another tip is, as you are sewing in these side seams to your skirt, if you're working with a striped material, try to make sure that your stripes are lining up, because if they don't, then the sides of your skirt, the stripes will be mismatched. And if that is something that bothers you, then you want to make sure that they're lined up while you're sewing in these side seams. And if you notice that I'm talking throughout most of this video, Lena and I were sitting talking as I was sewing, and I figured I would be explaining it to you guys this way instead of trying to sew and explain and sew and explain. I would kind of explain it to you guys as I was sewing. So if you see me talking, that's who I'm talking to and that's what's going on. Here is the main part of the skirt all sewn together. You have the 1/2 of the back panel, the side seam right there, then the straight front panel and another side seam, and the other 1/2 of the back of the skirt. The next thing we're going to sew in our skirt is the waistband. The waistband will end up being on the inside at the end, so you're not going to see much of it. But you take that 2-inch wide long piece of material that you cut out and you start matching it up with your skirt. You put the right sides together so the wrong sides are facing out, and you just match up the waistband along the whole entire top of your skirt. I then started sewing the seam attaching the waistband to the top of the skirt and sewed it along the whole length of the top of the skirt. You'll have a slight tail for the waistband at the end, but that will just get cut off and it won't matter. This is what it'll look like once that waistband is sewn on. So this is how it'll be sewn. And then once you come to the end of the waistband, like I said, you'll have that slight tail. But as you can see here, I am going to take a scissors and just snip it off where the skirt ends, and it'll be perfectly fine. It'll get sewn together and it'll look great. After your waistband is sewn on, you're going to pull it up from your skirt and sew a seam on the right side of that seam you just created. You're just going to sew a straight line all the way down, and if you want to pull that extra material that's underneath from the previous seam, if you want to pull that to the right hand side and catch that in the seam you're sewing, then it will all lay flat when your waistband tucks down into your skirt. Here is the finished seam that I created. I just have a small seam sewn right on top of the seam connecting the waistband to the normal skirt, and that just holds that tail fabric underneath, if you want to call it that. That just holds it up and then flat when that waistband will get tucked down into your skirt and sewn down. The next thing we did was just iron all the seams flat and iron the waistband up because it was wanting to roll down because it was such a small piece of fabric. So we just ironed everything flat, that way the last bits of sewing would be easy and the material would lay nice when we were sewing. The bottom of the skirt here where the two side seams met was a little bit uneven, so Lena just took a scissors and just trimmed it out so that it met perfectly and you couldn't tell. Lena then took the waistband and folded it down onto the inside of the skirt, right on top of the seam that attached it to the skirt. She then ironed it down, that way when we were sewing in the elastic to the waistband and sewing it down, it was nice and flat and I didn't have to worry about it not being sewn evenly or something like that. The next thing I did was take the skirt, and you can see the waistband is ironed down here, and I'm going to sew a seam along the bottom of the waistband from that tuck all the way to the side seam of the skirt, and this is going to be a guide for where we put our elastic in the skirt. This is what it looks like then on the inside. You have that seam sewn down along the bottom of the waistband, sewing the waistband down inside the skirt, and also giving you a guide for where your elastic is going to go. I then did the exact same thing on the other side from that tuck all the way into the side seam to create another little slot for the elastic and sew the waistband down. This is what it looks like then when you sew the waistband down and have those two seams going from the tuck to the side on either one of the back panels. The next thing I did was I took a piece of elastic that was 3 inches long and 1 inch thick, and I fed it through this small little area, making sure to hold on to the one side so I didn't lose it. Once I had the elastic threaded through that little space, I just sewed a straight line up and down a couple times to the elastic to hold it in there and keep it from slipping back. This is what that little line looks like that I just sewed, and it keeps the elastic tight in that little pocket. The next thing you want to do is kind of bunch up your material and push the elastic all the way through that pocket till it comes out on the other side, because it's going to gather your material slightly around the elastic to pull it in around the back of your waist. Since the elastic is sewn in the one end already, you don't have to worry about it slipping out. But then once the elastic is fed out to the other end and the material is gathered around it, just sew up and down on that other end a couple times to firmly keep the elastic in that area. You then do the exact same thing to the other side with another 3-inch strip of elastic. So you have 2 pieces of elastic in the back of your skirt and 2 places where your skirt gathers around those tucks. The next thing you're going to do is just finish sewing your waistband down inside your skirt. So you're going to take that first little area before that strip of elastic is and sew a seam from the beginning to the end, sewing your waistband down. Do it again here in this big area, just sewing your waistband completely down, and it'll connect to those seams where your elastic is inserted inside your skirt. Sewing that entire waistband down just creates a nice finished waistband for the inside of your skirt. You know it'll never come up or turn up when you're wearing it, and it makes a thicker band to keep the skirt on your waist. So guess what, guys? We are almost done with this skirt. The next thing you're going to do is connect those two straight back panels together and just sew a straight seam all the way from top to bottom. That way your skirt will finally be a circle and finally be looking a little bit more like a skirt. This seam will be centered in the back of the skirt, and this is what it should look like once you have that final straight back seam sewn in. Alright guys, this is the last thing we have to do. So you just turn your hem up about 1/4 of an inch and sew a seam just the whole way around to hold your hem up. That's it. That is the final thing, and then your skirt will be completely done. Alright guys, here is what the finished product looks like for the hem. Nothing fancy, nothing perfect, but it works great. These skirts take little to no time to make. I made 2 today, and when I started this day, I did not even know how to make them. So they are super quick and easy, and they are super comfortable. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, and if you're new to my channel, consider subscribing for some more great ideas. Hopefully this gave you some great ways that you can make a skirt, or even maybe some motivation to get a project done that needs working on in your house. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I'll see you in my next video.